In late 2022, WizKids announced they would be expanding their format lists for HeroClix. In the 20 years prior, there really was only one official way to play HeroClix, and that was 300 Modern Age. Yes, Golden Age existed, and there were various other formats brought to life by tournament organizers and various organizations, but if you wanted to play what many considered to be real HeroClix, you had to be playing 300 Modern. 2022 was the first insight we would get into a new format otherwise known as Silver Age. Since its initial announcement, Silver Age has undergone a few major changes to its rules and overall feel. Currently, it is the official tournament format of the Rock, and as such will be utilized for all major Rock events for the foreseeable future. A few important notes about Silver Age. It is a 400-point build total. You are allowed to utilize figures released since Superior Foes of Spider-Man back in 2016. A minimum of half of your force must be figures that are not Modern Age legal. Also, if a person were to attempt a mission point victory, they would be required to obtain 30 mission points instead of the traditional 20. The map list for these events is equally as extensive, spanning back to 2016, and includes a large variety of Rock maps. There is a ban list and a series of erratas to characters, and those can be found under the Silver Age information on the win. A link in the description below. Now that we understand the basic outline of the format, we can start diving deep into the possibilities of Silver Age. This video will cover top-level tenets of Silver Age team building. There are simply too many figures to do an in-depth analysis of the entire field, and depending on the region where this event is taking place, you will see an incredible variety of teams being piloted. Here are the main things that we want to consider when setting up our Silver Age force. It is important to remember that I do not mention these things to overwhelm you, but to make you aware of the potential challenges you may face when playing in Silver Age. Number 1. Are you playing something that you're comfortable with? Due to the sheer size of the Silver Age field, picking out a team to pilot can be overwhelming at best and soul-crushing at worst. Many of us have been playing HeroClix for a long time, and old sets and rules updates can get us all jumbled up when we consider what sort of older game elements we want to run. My biggest suggestion for Silver Age events, even if you do not listen to any other advice I provide you, play something you have familiarity with. Something you have played before or something you understand well. Previous gameplay experience will give you a strong advantage over people attempting to pilot something for the first time. This will also save you a ton of time on practice requirements, so you can focus on the minor changes and adjustments to 400 points, rather than learning an entirely new force in an extremely new meta and entirely new point bracket. For those who know me, you are aware of my favorite piece in this game is the Tri-Sentinel. I have played Tri-Sentinels in varying methods for years. It is because of this familiarity that allows me to incorporate them on my teams and be ahead of the game, because that portion of my build is already good to go. I highly recommend you pick out something you know and build around that first. If it doesn't end up working out, that's okay, but at least it's a good starting point. 2. Do you have answers for major meta staples? The broadness of Silver Age brings forth shenanigans. Over the past decade, there have been many figures which do things no other figure before or since can do. It is important to be aware of as many of these figures as possible, and to have the best available answers within the confines of your build, so that you are ready for whatever you may face. Here are a few things to consider. Power erasure. What is your plan for an opponent that can take away all of your powers? Do you have something that can prevent that? Does your team work well when spread out? Do you have a strong enough offensive force to take those figures out of the game before they can remove your powers? No matter what, you need to ensure that you're prepared for this style of gameplay. Don't die. Sometimes figures can be difficult to put down. They can require multiple attacks like the Danger Room constructs, or maybe they cannot be KO'd while other figures are still on the map, like Corrupt GCPD Cop. In traditional HeroClix, I always recommend having a minimum of 3 attackers ready to go in your force. In Silver Age, since we have 4 base actions available to us, I would suggest bumping this number up to 4 or even 5. It is much simpler to have characters attack multiple times in the same turn, so that they can fulfill this suggestion as well. Either way, you need to make sure you can deal enough damage quickly to take down teams whose entire goal is to never be KO'd. One-man armies. In a 400-point setting, OMAs, or one-man armies, are not as potent as they can be in traditional 300-point matches. This does not mean that you will not see them played. Characters like Goblin King and Unimind will still be prevalent in 400-point games and should be prepared for accordingly. OMAs are a type of don't die that a lot of players do not have adequate preparation for. It is important to ensure that you have a plan of action for taking down an OMA-style character, otherwise that time limit can sneak up on you and suddenly you find yourself losing a match 25-0. Alpha Strike teams. The inverse of don't die and OMAs is a team that can attack many times in a single turn for massive amounts of damage. Should these teams be allowed to go first in a match, the game can sometimes be over before they start. Full map reach on a larger map with an entire force is commonplace for these teams, and their damage can be deceiving. In 2023, I was part of the winning team for the Rock Cup for the 3v3 event. The team I piloted was able to alpha strike a large map and attack a grand total of 8 times, having a minimum of 12 attack value, but likely was always an upwards of a 15 on each of those attacks. And that was in a 300-point setting with only 4 actions after leadership. Massive alpha strike builds are going to be a dime a dozen now, and should not be underestimated. Make sure your force has a way to limit opposing attacks and can survive a few hits should the initiative roll go poorly for you. Rollouts. Next is an issue we are facing right now in the 300 modern space, an abundance of rollouts. There exist teams in 400 Silver Age that can have a 3-6 super senses, 4-6 shape change, and have a reducer all at the same time. These teams can seem rather daunting at first glance, but you realize how quickly they fall apart with the few cheap counters that are implemented. Since all black the Necrosword is not allowed in the format anymore, players must rely on other options to get through some of these pesky dice rolling mechanics. A few quick favorites I tend to play are having access to Battle Fury for shape change, and the 9 of Swords tarot card, and SVAC 027 Gwen Stacy for super senses. Characters like Agatha Harkness and Legacy Cosmo also do a good job of removing powers you do not want to have to deal with. Equipment shenanigans. With nearly a decade of figures comes nearly a decade of equipment. We can all take a minute to rejoice that all black is no more for the time being. But then the reality sets in. There is still a ton of equipment that is legal to play, and preparing for all of it can be a mountainous task. It is important in Silver to use your resources, have answers for equipment, and do not get too reliant on it yourself. But also don't forget that Silver Age equipment can vastly enhance the quality of your build. Pieces like the Power Gem can make characters deal shocking amounts of damage, while the Mandarin Rings provide a crazy amount of utility. Barrier. In Silver Age, there are many different figures that have cheap or free barrier access, so be prepared for players to spam out blocking terrain on the map, making it very difficult to reach the scoreable points of their force. Ensuring you have a response to barrier will allow you to make short work of these teams. In my video about the core values of HeroClix team building, I discussed the Big 6. Anytime a HeroClix team is being built, the best starting point is to have the most well-rounded force you can. The Big 6 can provide that experience with minimal effort. In Silver Age, many different figures can prevent characters from using the powers they intended. That is why it's important to have access to as many different mechanics as possible. You won't want to build your team using a massive amounts of Perplex only to face a Jennifer Kale, or with many sources of Outwit only to face a team full of Cosmic Energy figures. The speed of the game. A 400-point build is 33% larger than the standard 300 points we are all accustomed to. 33% more figures means more complex teams. Complex teams take longer to play and will cause the game to drag on longer than anticipated. Hopefully, the tournament organizer will provide extra time in each round to accommodate for this. But if not, you need to make sure you are playing a team that is simple enough to pilot quickly. This will allow you to have as many turns as possible to take on your opponent. Nothing is worse than only getting 3 turns because you took 15 minutes to plan out what you were going to do before you actually did it, due to the sheer number of mechanics on your team. Excellent figures in Silver Age. Now that we've given ourselves plenty to think about concerning our Silver Age builds, let's take a look at some powerful characters you can expect to see in Silver Age. This is obviously not going to be a fully comprehensive list, and I highly recommend you take some time to browse HCUnits to go over the sets you may not be familiar with. As many of you know, my starting point for any team is always, who is my primary attacker? This question is much more complex in Silver Age than it is in Modern. Because of a few necessary bans, there are many characters that normally wouldn't have been considered that are now fairly powerful picks. Here are a few awesome characters to keep in mind when constructing your Silver Age force. These are in no particular order, and they're all solid plays in their own right. X-Men Rise and Fall Blackheart was a meta staple for years when he was in Modern. His ability to make attacks from both close and ranged make him insanely versatile on any team, and his double stop click that generates his own mastermind fodder is top tier. In 400 points, his 75 point cost feels very efficient, and he takes care of several of the big six all on his own. In the age of ID cards, Elseworlds Green Arrow was a 5-point menace that every player had to be acutely aware of. These days, his 80 point cost may seem a bit steep, but considering his attack power completely erases defense powers from a hit target until your next turn, he is a mighty strong option. Pairing him with a few different Mandarin rings, or a motorcycle, or exospecs to keep him mobile will force your opponent to deal with him right away before moving on to any other targets on your force. A 15-point phenom of the mystical and monster teams of old, ex-DPS Wendigo can really pack a punch. Having the ability to heal past his starting line and attack multiple times in a turn, he can single-handedly end games if put in the right position. Due to his low cost, should he be KO'd quickly, it really doesn't put that high of a strain on a team. Wendigo is an excellent splash addition to any force looking for some extra damage. A piece near and dear to my heart, Wonder Woman 80 The Flash was the primary taxi on my winning build last year. A huge speed with double charge and a 12 attack for only 30 points makes this guy very splashable on any team, but he is also just worth considering for a main focus of the build. Pairing Flash with Prime Iron Spider from SMBA gives your entire team a 12 attack when they are adjacent to Flash, making your math for hitting really nice. With the Scarlet Witch catching the Banhammer from Silver Age, there is still one who can generate the dreaded rune marker. Agatha Harkness, while a little bit more expensive than the Witch, is still a potent holder of the Darkhold. Her ability to place in hindering terrain makes her very difficult to pin down, and starting off a 12 for 4 from range with RCE makes her a very nice ranged attacker. Agatha is an option that should be considered by everyone. Every good offense needs to be countered by an excellent defense. For every great attacker in the meta, there is a defensive piece that will shut down their master plan and bring everything to a screeching halt. These figures are all very unique in their ability to assist defensively and keep a team together. When he was first released, the meta for Heroclix was primarily ranged focused. Joker's Wild Bizarro Green Arrow's ability to become the target of range attacks when any friendly adjacent character is targeted forces an opponent to become creative when they're trying to fight, and forces them to come in close to land any meaningful attacks early. Depending on the meta you're seeing, Bizarro Green Arrow is a very wise call in the 400 point space. In an age where retaliators were running wild, there was one man who stood alone in the fight against their rage. Ex-DPS Harry Leland is effectively the other side of the defensive coin for Bizarro Green Arrow. Forcing characters to lower their attack and damage values when they move within 4 squares of him, Harry punishes the close combat game very harshly. Pairing that with preventing opposing characters from being placed within 4, he forces your opponent to focus on range attacking. These days, stat modifications are a dime a dozen. It is trivial to get characters up to a 13, 14, or even 15 attack value. Avengers Infinity Demon in an Armor prevents this from happening and forces your opponent to have to roll dice the old-fashioned way. Adding in his Defend, Telekinesis, and Outwit to the mix, Demon in an Armor is a great counter to teams with stats that are a bit out of control. Lockjaw is the bestest boy. We know this to be true. In 2018, we were graced with a good boy who could provide a crazy amount of utility to any team. Lockjaw and his Infinity Collar have a pick-a-power trait that can potentially turn him into an attacker as well. Without a stipulation for Mastermind, Lockjaw needing to be damaged 6 times prior to being KO'd makes him a great defensive post to any team. Also, now that pushing damage is no longer in effect in Heroclix, it is a much safer play overall. Rounding off our list of defensive mainstays is What If Peace Machine. His Suppression Field trait makes all damage sources deal a maximum of 3 until he's off the board. If you have a team that is okay with taking multiple hits and want to force your opponent to rethink their big damage attacks, Peace Machine is a great choice. Unfortunately, his Force Blast trait is effectively useless at this point, but his TK, Outwit, and Taxi abilities make him a proper good defensive figure. The land between offense and defense is Support. These characters provide great utility to teams by modifying stats, removing or granting powers, and getting teams into position. Good support pieces are where most of a team's big 6 access comes from, and they are always worth their points. A figure that is potent in Modern, but a menace in Silver Age, is Mad Jim Jaspers, from 10 of Swords. Mad Jim is arguably the best support figure in Silver Age. His ability to take a power action to equip a friendly character with equipment from your sideline is bonkers. Equipment such as the Infinity Gauntlet, Cosmic Cube, or a motorcycle or hell cycle can give a huge point boost to your squad. Not to mention, he can grant these equipment to giant or colossal characters after the game begins. Mad Jim is a must play for a variety of squads. While Lockjaw is definitely the bestest boy, Cosmo is definitely the goodest girl. Being able to take power actions to turn off opposing powers within range makes Cosmo invaluable to both offensive and defensive teams. Having Outwit and TK access with improved targeting hindering terrain and characters makes her a great support piece for access to 2 powers from the Big Six. Likely the oldest figure on my list, Superior Foes of Spiderman Overdrive is one of the OG Hyper Taxi figures we have seen over the years. Having 11 speed with Sidestep and Passenger 4 on the charged up bystander he generates, Overdrive is a great, cheap tool for getting a team into position. He can also pilot attack to copy and power, giving you much needed damage boosts with your close attacks. Another taxi on this list is Wonder Woman 80 Chip. Chip doesn't quite offer as much reach as Overdrive, but his trade-off is he can carry up to 8 characters, has access to probability control, telekinesis, and can also generate constructs. Chip provides a good amount of support while giving some pseudo-offense in the process. The definition of a control piece, JLU Ace has a special place in my heart. Preventing any other characters from utilizing probability control, Ace has a monstrous amount of control for a board. Packing in TK and Perplex on top, and she becomes one of the best support pieces in the game, who is also criminally underplayed. If you are confident in your dice and your ability to play HeroClix, I highly recommend you consider Ace on your team. Prime figures also play a very important role in Silver Age. Aside from the previously mentioned Mad Jim Jaspers, there are several excellent options to consider. Primes can provide a nice sideline utility, but can also give your team benefits depending on the style of prime you're using. There are too many excellent primes to choose from, but these are some of my favorites that I always consider when building Silver Age teams. SMBA Iron Spider enables your entire team to share an upwards of 12 attack when paired with the right characters, as he gives every other figure on your team Sinister Syndicate team ability. He also comes ready with Charge, Flurry, Plasticity, and Stealth on his speed power, Poison on dial, and a damage power that provides Leadership, Outwit, Shape Change, and turns off opposing equipment within 4 squares when he succeeds at that leadership. This is one of my favorite pieces in HeroClix right now, and while he can be tricky to pull off correctly, once you do, he pays off dividends immediately. The second prime on this list from SMBA, Black Suit Spider-Man, needs no introduction. He has been a meta staple since his release, and it would be criminal to list off a bunch of playable primes without giving him a nod. Dealing out massive amounts of damage and having a crazy amount of survivability, Spider-Man is a terrific choice for your prime should you elect to go that route. Fantastic Four Black Leopard has one of the most unique abilities in the game of HeroClix. His ability to force opponents' values to max out at his printed values for attack, defense, and damage as long as they are within 6 in line of fire, Black Leopard can bring a stat modification team's tempo to a screeching halt. He requires a fair amount of finesse to pilot effectively, but once you've determined a good way to keep him alive, he can completely control the pacing of a game. A bit of a riskier play due to his one click of life, Prime Q has a tremendous amount of control in a HeroClix match. Anytime dice replacement is on the table, it needs to be considered, and Q does it better than most. Being able to replace a die in both attacks and Super Senses rolls is crazy strong. Q provides some of the best utility in HeroClix in a very efficient 30-point package. As mentioned previously, Power Erasure is really important in Silver Age, and for 30 points, Prime Black Widow from ABPI does just enough to stay relevant. Her ability to remove a defense power from an adjacent opposing character is a wonderful utility piece that is appropriately costed. Silver Age equipment is extensive. There is so much for very cheap that is worth adding to a team. Players often find themselves paying too many points for all the swag they want to give their characters. Here are 5 pieces of equipment that I believe are always in the running for consideration. The Emotional Modifier is likely the best equipment ever printed. Taking a free to give a blanket effect within a certain radius is just bonkers, and the Emo mod can do it 3 different ways. Whether you want to make your team impervious to opposing mind control and token giving, while also disregarding opposing shape change or forcing the lowering of stats. This is one equipment that I firmly believe should be on every single Silver Age team without question. If you do not have it, you better have a good reason as to why. The next one is pretty straightforward. The power gem providing a blanket +1 attack and +2 damage to any character for 10 points is a massive amount of utility. Just place the gem on any attacker you like and let them cook. Sidestep is arguably one of the top 3 best powers in HeroClix, so granting any character sidestep, flight, and plasticity for 5 points with the Cloak of Levitation is absolutely nuts. There's not much more to be said than that. Next are the Mandarin Rings. I'm lumping all of the Mandarin Rings into the same pile as they're so versatile. When the rules update hit and characters could start the game equipped with 2 rings at the same time, their point utility became insane. There are too many combinations for these rings to list them all out, but whether your goal is offensive or defensive or utility, there is a ring combination that will fit best. The Exospecs is one of the premier pieces of equipment for granting powers to characters. A pseudo pick-a power, they can grant speed or attack powers each turn with a small trade-off of not being able to use any other powers of the chosen type. Having cheap access to any move and attack, or things like Pulse Wave or Steel Energy at a whim, is super exciting. Next we get on to my favorite part of the entire video, Colossal Retaliation. It's one of my favorite mechanics in HeroClix that rewards clever, aggressive positioning and can really swing a game into your favor when it's pulled off correctly. Silver Age is chock full of retaliation, and nearly all of it is great. Anytime you have some spare points on your build, always make sure you're considering a Retaliator. It also helps that my favorite piece in the game also happens to be a Colossal Retaliator. No more beating around the bush. The Tri-Sentinel is arguably the most potent retaliation piece to ever exist in HeroClix. An offensive powerhouse that gets to utilize Pulse Wave after placing and then dealing free damage to characters adjacent to the blocking terrain it destroys. This piece is to be feared and should always be priority target number 1 when you sit across the board from it. Mangog has some incredible damage potential for 30 points. His Retaliation can potentially deal 7 damage plus knockback thanks to his super strength on an entire team. If you are playing on a larger map, his Pull the Odin Sword trait can also give your team a boost and provide an extra attacker that is difficult to put down. When talking about Colossal Carnage, both the original and the legacy are worth considering for retal on your force. They are slightly different in practical use, but both are super cheap at 10 points, and they can sway games to your favor if they're allowed to retaliate. The Scourge of the Modern Age during his life cycle sorta prevents his targets from using defense powers during a retaliation. He also deals 1 penetrating damage to all opposing characters within 2 after resolutions. Be cautious when facing the Bringer of the Ragnarok, lest you be engulfed in his fiery fury. Last on my Retaliator list is Groot from Avengers Infinity. Groot provides as much utility as damage for a team. His walking woods that he generates can give a team some much needed attackers once the game has gotten into the weeds, and he's an excellent choice for any team to fill out the final piece of the Big Six due to the leadership that he has on dial. In Modern Age, there are quite a few things that we can see on our sideline. This gets compounded when we dive into Silver Age. Honestly, there are too many things to cover here, so if you'd like to see a whole video talking about the Silver Age sideline, be sure to leave a comment down below. For the time being, here are a few game terms I advise you look over and get familiar with, as you will undoubtedly see them in the field of battle. Troublemakers and Trouble Alerts. Shifting Focus. Destroyer and Absorbing Man. Mystery Cards. Chthon. Additional equipment via Mad Jim Jaspers. All of these things are going to be played in spades, and since the sideline is 2 elements for every 100 points of the build total, a 400 point game is going to give you 8 sideline spots versus the 6 that we're used to. In my previous video, I mentioned that you should be keeping your tarot decks low risk and low reward. This is much more important for Silver Age than it is in Modern. There are so many game elements to consider, any card could potentially become a detriment if you're not careful. If you are worried about tarot, try out a few different combinations versus a variety of opposing builds to see what works best for you. After all of that, if you're still not satisfied, I would honestly consider not trying to play tarot to avoid any issues from the start. Tarot can sometimes be more of a hurt than a help, and it's wise to make the team as balanced as possible without giving your opponent an edge. The last topic I want to cover in regard to Silver Age is special terrain. Silver Age sees a return of certain special terrains that were very potent when they were played in Modern. While terrain dials are banned in Silver, special terrain without a dial is fair game. This leaves two remaining options, the boxing ring and the WWE ring. The boxing ring can really slow down an opponent by lowering their stats when attempting to attack inwards or outwards from the ring, and the WWE ring can make any HeroClix match a multiverse game, allowing access to the WWE pack when picking powers from traits or equipment like the Exospecs. If you have 5 points remaining on your build, playing one of these terrain is always a good idea. Silver Age can be a bit daunting to take on at full force. There is a lot going on and a ton to consider, with way too many figures for me to cover in this video. Be sure to utilize HCUnits.net for your team building and to check out the meta tab to see what other people are building around for Silver Age. Don't forget, make sure you are comfortable with your team, as it'll be far more beneficial than playing the right pieces or having the correct elements available. Silver Age is the Wild West of HeroClix right now, and the more prepared you are, the better you will perform. Thanks for watching the video all the way to the end. I know this was a fairly long haul, and I covered a lot of information, so I really appreciate it. What sort of figures are you excited about for Silver Age? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below, and let me know what other videos you'd like to see me make. Thanks, and have a great day.